Hello, I'm Chuck Benoit. Welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. Recently, President Trump had a bit of a verbal tussle with Pope Leo XIV. I believe it's important to acknowledge who threw the first punch, so to speak, and it wasn't President Trump. It is worth noting that the Pope erroneously called the Iranian war being about the U.S. against the Iranian population. That is a blatant mischaracterization of the facts. President Trump is clearly for the Iranian people. The war is against Muslim extremists who would be quite happy to wipe out America, Israel, and the Catholic Church, for that matter. But this mischaracterization allows the Pope to speak in moral terms as it relates to these Iranian citizens. And if it wasn't for his tone deafness, he could hear these very people pleading with President Trump to keep bombing and not to negotiate for peace. See, the only option good people have when confronting evil is to eliminate it. Bowing in a false humility to evil is, in fact, evil. And remember, the first group of people who God throws into the lake of fire are not warmongers. They're not sexual deviants or even murderers. They're cowards. Those who won't stand up against evil, in my humble opinion, could easily be called cowards. There's a difference between why law enforcement carries a gun and why the criminal carries one. God confronts evil with strength. He doesn't extend the right hand of fellowship. I would encourage Pope Leo to take a closer look at how Jesus intends to return and deal with his enemies and act accordingly. With that, good morning, Mike Levine.
Good morning, Chuck. It's amazing that you have to straighten out the Pope.
Yeah, well,
That is
yeah.
a crazy world we're living in, right? Yeah, okay, there you go. Chuck, well,
Sometimes it's
Chuck, I trust you to do that.
sometimes it's perspective. You get the wrong focus, and everything else is skewed. This isn't a war against the citizenry of Iran. We're dealing with a cult, a death cult that has nothing to do with the Iranian citizenry.
Chuck, I would love to understand the tentacles that reach into these institutions to make these leaders do and say the things that they say, Chuck. And I really want to put more emphasis on what I just said, because what I said wasn't really that impactful. It didn't have a lot of punch to it. But I would really love to see the tentacles and know what these people get in return for their outlandish, ridiculous points of view, Chuck.
Well, I believe it's a self-righteousness, actually, Mike. It's
That's
really,
really scary.
well,
I'd
it's
rather
really,
it be money, power, right?
yeah. How hard
Decadent
is it?
lifestyles, like our friend Mr. Swalwell, right? I mean, honestly, this Swalwell guy, man. I mean, have you seen the videos, Chuck? Have you seen the videos of this Eric Swalwell?
I've seen
Have you seen
enough.
it?
I've seen enough.
Oh man. So I mean, again, we could get in. That's a long story, right? We'll cover it probably never, because pretty soon it's going to be irrelevant. This guy's whole entire political career is in the garbage can overnight because of the videos that are circulating. And I'm talking, this is a classic example of a nowhere city councilman in California. That's what he was before the Chinese Communist Party started putting money behind him through the honeypot program with Miss Fang Fang, or whatever her name is, right? But this guy sold out his constituents for a decadent lifestyle and got way up the food chain. He was on the Intelligence Committee for the United States of America with one of the highest security clearances available in this country. And this scumbag, right? And I'm not talking, whatever. There's a lot of people that have decadent lifestyles. Obviously, look at the Epstein files, right, as an example. So I'm not excusing what he's about, but I am saying he's not alone, right? But he sold out America for a decadent lifestyle. And now I have the Pope telling us that standing up against evil is wrong. And it's hard for me to connect those dots, Chuck.
Yeah, well, again, I think it basically it begins with where is your end game? If your end game is here and your end game is now, then yeah, you don't want anything messing around with your lifestyle. But if your end game is eternity and long-term peace on earth, well, then sometimes you might have to get out of your comfort zone because peace doesn't.
Let me just go there because you know what, Chuck, and what I love you, and you know I do, right? But let me give that to you from the Jewish perspective, okay? Because I'm into here and now. I am very much into here and now. And I tell you, you look at the most prominent rabbis in the world. I like Jonathan Sacks. I mean, he's probably my favorite rabbi. He died a few years ago. He's a British guy. And but he said, you know, the interesting thing about Judaism is we don't really talk a lot about the afterlife. You know, we're really about here and now. And what I'm saying to Eric Swalwell right now is no, you're making a mess here and now. Okay? This isn't about, you know, whether you're going to heaven or not, Mr. Swalwell. This is about what is the impact on your wife and kids? What is the impact on your grandchildren, great grandchildren, generations that you will never know? That's the mess you're making. It's not about whether you're going to heaven or not. It's in the here and now, Chuck. And that's
Yeah,
what
well,
I'm going to leave it at that.
yeah,
Okay, because I don't want to drill too down deep into
yeah.
this,
Well, you
right?
jumped in a little. You
But I
jumped in a
think
little ahead of me. I said eternity and the future.
okay.
No, the future right
And
here.
again, I'm not disagreeing with you, Chuck. I'm just
Okay, well,
highlighting the other side of the story, which is to me the meat and potatoes.
well, let me throw a little something in there. For all those people who have any idea of what the Bible says or no idea. It's important to note that all of the promises that God gave the Jews were for here and now. And that's why it's so important for the Jew for here and now, because that's where their promises are located, right here on the earth. But what I'm talking about is not necessarily when I talk about eternity. It's certainly eternity is where the Christians' promises are, where you have heavenly promises. But the future, what's happening right here and right now for the future, that's what I was talking about. So hopefully you got that
That's great.
straightened out.
Well, I just want to tell you something, Chuck, and I know we have limited amount of time. Maybe we should save it for another day, but I'm telling you right now that I was driven to Judaism because of the here and now. I find that it's my responsibility to do everything I can to straighten out this train wreck that humanity has created in the here and now for my kids and grandkids and my posterity. And people who talk about the here and now, they in my camp, okay? Because I want to do this now.
Well, there we go. There we go. And we could do a whole show on this.
Easily.
But let's go
We
ahead.
can
We
do it
did have
right now.
we did have a bit of a topic to discuss today, and we are asking the question: what do influencers need to be effective earning votes in the 2026 midterm election? And before we get started, why don't you define what you mean by influencers?
Influencer is anybody who wants to have an impact on the outcome of the election. Okay, so that happens a lot of different ways. Every grassroots person who shows up at any grassroots meeting is an influencer. They're coming to do something, to learn, if nothing more. And then, of course, the thing, let me just connect that dot real quick. And my guitar lessons, right? The guitar teachers tell you that your performance is going to be what you practice. What you practice, it becomes your product. So when people go to political meetings, they're there to learn so they can practice. And that sows into every interaction they have with people in their sphere of influence. And we've gone through a lot of that. We're going to continue today. So the answer is Anybody who's interested in politics and makes an effort to learn more about it or to talk to their neighbors about it or to get involved in an organization that supports one point of view or another is an influencer, Chuck.
There we go. And so we're talking about influencers in relation to this upcoming midterm election. And you have a few ideas here that you'd like to present as to what we might need. And the first thing you say that we need a platform. Now, a platform kind of tells me that you're talking to someone running for office, but are you saying that influencers should also know what it is they're really looking for?
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you don't know what you want, if you don't know which direction you'd like for your government to go, whether it's your city, your county, your state, or your nation, how in the world can you select a candidate? How can you know which candidate is going to be best for you? And that's another whole topic, Chuck. But at the end of the day, if it's like going on a trip without a destination. What do you want out of this, right? So every influencer, every American citizen, as far as I'm concerned, should have an opinion, should know what they want, right? And that's why for me, it's very easy to break it down to the nuts and bolts. People have to have groceries, they have to have housing, they have to have utilities, they have to have transportation. I mean, that's for good objectives. If you can make those utilities affordable, then you're going to move the country and the state in the right direction. So, and there are other things, right? People all have their priorities. You know, I don't need to get into the litany of priorities, right? We've had so many things to fight over the last several years, right? That it's a big list, and I'm wasting time talking about it right now. But so yeah, I'm saying to you that every single citizen of this country should know what their legislative priorities are, and they need to write them down. I would put them in a palm card and carry them in your pocket, Chuck.
Yeah, now you say the influencer, those of us who want to be effective as we go out there and root for or stand behind a particular politician
or against.
But the politician should also have their ideas written down. They should have their own palm card, and shouldn't we be able to look at both of those pieces of paper, so to speak, and determine whether or not we're really a step behind somebody who's behind us?
You know, Chuck, politicians come up with their platforms off of polling, Chuck. And that's just the way it is. You know, most politicians complete whatever they say they're for or against or whatever. It's just propaganda. They get their talking points off of polling. They want to win an election. That's it. How do I know that? Oh, I worked with the national campaign team. That's what they advised me. But of course, I am not your typical politician, okay? Because my mother taught me not to follow in the mainstream. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't make it right. And you know me well enough to know that I'm not somebody who easily subordinates, right? So I'm telling you that politicians get their talking points off of polling. So for example, you know, look at the hot issues that are going on in the country or your state or your community, right? And if you have people that's all they're talking about, like for example, when I ran in 2024, Chuck, nobody was talking about the devastating effects of the Live Local Act, but I was.
Yeah, except I was gonna say, except you, Mike.
Exactly. So that's my point. And that today, in hindsight, almost everybody agrees that the Live Local Act is horrible legislation, probably one of the worst packages of legislation in our history. But I was talking about it, and actually I should have been talking about it in 2022 before it passed. But to be honest with you, it was kind of shoved down the pipeline in a way that we weren't prepared to address it in 2023. So anyway, my point to you is that politicians, if you're looking at a politician's palm card, you're looking at the politician's polling. not the politician at all. Like, for example, in the gubernatorial race, Chuck, I would highly recommend that voters take a look and see, we should maybe do it, Chuck. What exactly did these candidates stand for when they were in other offices? Now, keep in mind, you got people running for the governor's slot, for example, who've never held public office. And, you can say Rick Scott became elected governor. He never held public office before. Donald Trump became the president of the United States, and he had never held public office before. But those people who have a track record. And I'm telling you that if you look at a candidate's track record and their track record doesn't support your values, you can't vote for them. Period.
Doesn't make sense to anyway. So I guess my point, what I would do is this point number one is that the influencer himself or herself needs their own platform, even more importantly than whether or not they're totally on board with the campaign or the politician.
So let me go a little deeper into that, Chuck. So let me challenge every activist who sees this broadcast. When you go to these meetings, you should utilize the institutional knowledge in the room in order to develop your platform. So you'll go in and say, you know what, I think that I'm really concerned about public education. So go to the meeting and ask questions in the room, because these people are all like-minded, just like you. And you just raise your hand and say, hey, I've got a couple of questions about, I think public education is really important. And this is what really concerns me about public education. Why don't you guys help me create my position on public education? And then be really careful about what those people tell you, because you may not agree with everything in the room. But my experience is that these grassroots organizations are echo chambers. Everybody pretty much agrees on everything. From a policy standpoint, where they deviate is about who they're going to support for public office, not what the policies are. And of course, the candidates always betray the base. They always betray the base and serve public interest after they're elected, Chuck. And that's been the story of my 2026 is just working with these grassroots organizations who claim to be one thing and then support candidates that they know are going to betray them. And that's happening right now as we speak in this midterm election cycle, Chuck.
Well, we bogged down on point number one, but let's move along to point number two, and that is that influence must clearly define the target audience. Now, are you talking about target audience? That tells me you're dealing with the candidate there, but are you saying? No. Go ahead. What's
the
your
target audience is the voter. Which votes are you trying to influence, right? So this goes back to the precinct committee man, precinct committee woman's concept, right? That's why that is. So, for example, that's a great reason. Join the Republican Executive Committee, become a precinct committee man or precinct committee woman, and you know what? The party doesn't want anybody to have a platform. Okay, they don't. They're telling you that. We don't want a platform because we want the legislators who we elect and the executive branch elected officials, we want them to be able to go and do whatever they want. So I'm saying to you that as a precinct committee man or woman, create your own value proposition, put it on a palm card, and get to know people who live in your precinct and hand out your palm cards and just put a little disclaimer. These are my personal point of view. I'm your precinct committee man or precinct committee woman. These are my point of view. This does not reflect the county Republican Executive Committee, but this is what I'm concerned about as your precinct committee man or precinct committee woman. And now you're leading. That is the difference, Chuck, between following and leading. Now you're leading. And when people ask you about the legislative priorities on your palm card, you're going to be passionate about it because they're yours. And you will be able to persuade because they're yours, right?
There you go.
So that's my point about target audience, Chuck.
Yeah, now just had a question thrown into our comment section. by John. How do we get the information you're talking about? Where on the web are politicians' track records published in an easily accessible way? I guess my first question is it published in an easily accessible way?
Well, you have to know, John. Thank you for the question, by the way, that all of their voting records is on their website. So go to the Florida, if you're in Florida, right? You go to floridahouse.gov, you go to Florida Senate, right? And look it up, and you can just search up the legislator, any legislator in the state of Florida, and you can see what bills they've sponsored, what bills they've co-sponsored, what committees they're on, how they voted in committee on every single bill. And the United States Congress is the same way, John. You can look up everything about it's all made public, but it's not necessarily in your typical social media platform. Okay, that's not where you're going to find that. You need to go directly to, and that's why, John, I also am a huge advocate of source documents. Like, for example, I was prepping, I was avoiding actually logging on to this call with Chuck this morning, and I was watching a press conference from the Department of War. Well, if you want to know what's going on in Iran, watch the press conferences as they come out, because that's where you're going to go to the heart of the matter. The people that are creating this policy and executing on policy, that is the source of the information. So what they say is true. It is the American point of view on Iran, for example. And the whitehouse.gov also has they have all their press releases there, all of their press conferences and stuff like that. They're recorded there. That's where you get the root of the information. So the idea, if you want to know how to know what is the track record and history of an elected official, go to the chamber where they serve and look at their actual voting record. And depending on how ambitious you are, you can read the bills and see how they voted on them. And I'm going to turn this back over to Chuck.
Yeah, so at some point or another, those of us who are a little more active may begin to work with a candidate or a party, and there are things called campaign management apps, and who's supposed to provide that? Is the Republican Party supposed to do that, or is explain to us? Where do you get these apps, and how do you use them to determine what your day is going to be?
Chuck, I'm going to just take the opportunity here. This is the big challenge that we all have. I mean, Chuck, you and I go through this every single day. We talk about it all the time. We have this, they call it a live. That's what these are called. They're called lives, right? So we have this live stream that gets recorded. And then we say to ourselves, how much money are we going to put into this, right? And this doesn't make money for us. It costs us money, to do this, time and money. So the campaign apps are the same thing. When you get all the REC members, all of the members of these various different grassroots organizations, they need that app. When they meet someone, they need to be able to look it up and find out, what is your party affiliation? How long, have you changed parties in your voting history? How many elections have you voted in? Did you vote in primaries? And those campaign apps provide all of that information. But isn't it astounding that that the Republican Party in Florida has raised more money than ever? And even our local Republican Executive Committee is sitting on mountains of cash because these politicians leverage their relationship with special interests, and those special interests are donating. They're raising record amounts of money, but they don't give their members a campaign app. What is that about? That campaign app is so critical to the precinct committee man, precinct committee woman's success, yet the party that is flush with cash does not give their precinct committee men and women the basic fundamental tool they need to be effective, Chuck. So that's a great question. And then the precinct committee man and precinct committee woman are saying, well, if I buy it on my own, it's going to be expensive and it doesn't really contribute to my quality of life or anything. So I'm going to wait until somebody else does it, and somebody else never does it because we've been doing this for hundreds of years, and we've had campaign apps for a long time, but yet the the parent organization, no matter it's the REC or your local grassroots organization, nobody empowers their members with a campaign app. That's just a lack of priority. That means that their priority is not to create powerful precinct committee men and precinct committee women. They want to retain power by keeping their precinct committee men and precinct committee women weak.
Yeah, so yeah, we obviously have a primary time before a primary election before the main election, and what seems odd to me is the duplicity that we get in the idea that we're not allowed to influence the voting public for one Republican versus another Republican, but in the same time, the Republican Party is making it more and more difficult for the average anybody, the average what's the welder guy, Matt the welder, making it difficult for someone like him to even run for office. So where's the duplicity there? Why are we struggling during this primary time to get any kind of information about anybody?
Chuck, I'm going to tee off on that too. Okay. Honestly and truly, if I'm just going to do a hypothetical for you. What if Mike Levine was the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida?
Oh,
I'm telling you that as soon as election is over, I'm going to be talking to every Republican, whether they're members of the Republican Executive Committee or not, every Republican in every county. And I'm going to say, come on in here. Tell us your stuff. Who are you? What are you about? What do you believe? What don't you believe? And we start debating once a week. We have debates once a week, every week, looking for the best and strongest candidates. And believe me, that will filter out the weak, okay? And people you would have never suspected would rise to the top in those debates. And there you will find the strongest candidates. But of course, that's not the way the political parties work. The political parties already know who they want in charge. Hey, I'm a guy that owns 1,000 acres in Lake County, Florida, and I own, some retail real estate, and I own some businesses, and I own some manufacturing facilities and stuff, and I have certain interests that I want to protect in Tallahassee. So I want to get my brother-in-law or my cousin elected to, the Jordan brothers, classic example, right? David Jordan just shoved Mark Jordan into that property appraiser's job he knew absolutely nothing about, so that David Jordan could advance the interest of his family and himself and have another constitutional officer in his family influencing what happens politically in Lake County, Florida, right? And that is a classic example of the, wait for it, corruption that's going on and always has gone on. So I'm saying to you that if I was in charge, this is why David Jordan hates my guts, by the way, and his brother, who I've met him a couple of times, but whatever he is, I don't know what he is, to be honest. But this is why they don't like me, Chuck, because they know that there are strong people in the county who can stand in front of a microphone and make a case, a legitimate case that actually improves the quality of life for median household income families. And that's the last thing that they want. And go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, Chuck, and sit in the waiting room while you're waiting for service and watch what's on the TV screen. They are campaigning for their minions every day, all day, every day by the commercials that are scrolling on those TV screens in the DMV. And you know what? I find that to be reprehensible misuse of power, Chuck.
yes. So as we're closing things down, we're
We're
concerned
closing,
about.
Chuck? We're just getting started, Chuck.
I know.
It's not over.
Yeah, one of these days we'll probably change our format to maybe like a 45-minute presentation. We just start getting going, and 30 minutes is pretty much up. We're also concerned about having a list of personal legislative priorities that's finite and a target audience that is finite. And in the case of primaries, we want to be talking to people who normally vote in a primary, and that's information that's available on these apps that we get. So with that in mind, Mike, why don't you give us a closing comment?
Ladies and gentlemen, every single American citizen should be a leader. Every single American citizen should have an opinion and back up their opinion with facts and knowledge and wisdom and understanding, and create a point of view. Document your point of view. Every single citizen in this country, when we individually take responsibility, this is what America's about. America's about taking responsibility for all of our condition in our lives, and then advocating for things that we believe in, that we think is good for our country. And that is where America can never be defeated. That is the American mindset, the concept that was created in the Constitution of this great country. And when every single American fights for their family, this is the nuclear family concept as well, then all families will be strong. So my point is, every single citizen has to be the leader of their family, and then the leader of their community, and then maybe the leader of their state, and maybe the leader of their country. But every single American has the ability to be a strong leader, and I would encourage all American citizens to exercise your right to lead. Chuck.
Well, thank you, Mike Levine, and thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at RestoreOurRep76, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you are unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.